Deadlock is already releasing the ranked mode. As of right now, the ranked queues are only for a few hours a day, and most importantly, they are solo queue only. And as somebody who almost explicitly only plays solo queue in a pretty high MMR, here are 10 things I've learned makes a massive difference in whether you win or not. And if done right, these tips might very well be the things that take you all the way from Initiate all the way to Eternus. But let's just dive into it. First and foremost, since the ranked system works very much like the normal game's queue system, it is in your best interest to tip the scales in your favor as soon as the game starts. By the time you're in the lobby, make sure that you make note of your own teammates' composition and the enemy team's composition as well. Take a look at the lanes and try to coordinate so you get a favorable matchup that go in the favor of your own team. Try to make sure that the heroes that thrive in solo lanes like Mo and Krill get to play solo, and make sure that support heroes like Kelvin or Bebop get to play alongside good damage dealers that can play off of the utility of their kit. If you cannot coordinate lanes in time, just look out for yourself and make sure that your own lane matchup is the best one possible. Tons of games are won or lost from this quick swap alone, and the more people know about it, the more likely you are to pull this off with the small window of time that you have at the start of each game. So to make sure that this video reaches as many people as possible, and so you can have the best rank experience possible, make sure that you hit the like button on the video, and dropping a comment probably helps as well. But moving on, once you are in the game, the name of the game will be souls per minute. Your first priority will always be getting as many souls as possible first, and then denying the enemies from getting their own souls second. Make sure that you get all the last hits and the soul orbs and the nice when possible, and as soon as you have an opening, try taking some space or poking at the enemy. The thing is that getting kills doesn't really matter too much at this stage of the game, so in most cases you're gonna be better off farming, getting as stacked as possible, and planning ahead for the early to mid game, since this is when you can make the most difference in the game of Deadlock. For example, when you have any openings in between waves, or if your enemy happens to be missing from their lane, make sure you make the most out of this very opening. Either try pushing the Guardian for some damage on it, or even taking it, try grabbing the nearby jungle for additional souls, or even look around the map to see if the enemy lanes are pushed up and ready to be ganked for a free kill. Just keep in mind that ganking for a kill usually really only is worth it if you can get the gank off without losing that many minions or a wave yourself, or if you can secure a Guardian or any other objective off of that wipe. If your lane opponent is missing because they're heading to another lane, make sure that you call this out to your teammates so that they can be prepared for any potential incoming ganks, and then either follow them or make the most out of the opening by getting, again, chip damage on the Guardian or the jungle or whatever. Because since kills usually aren't worth too much on their own, you're actually going to be best off just warning your teammates and then taking whatever you can get on your own for free instead. Especially since if your teammates are warned of the gank, they're probably just gonna fall back, in which case your lane opponent ended up wasting their time and you just got a ton of free souls for really no effort. And this leads me to the next point, which is something that most players still, myself included, keep missing out on. This is something I didn't learn in League and I still am struggling with it, but I'm still gonna mention it because it's huge. And that's the map. You're not looking at it enough. Look at it more often. I try to look at it whenever I have a second of downtime between waves, or if I'm running between lanes, ganking or rotating or whatever. No matter who you are, you're not looking at it enough. I don't think there's ever been a player that's been looking at it too much to the point where they're losing games because of it. That's because the map has so much information, and depending on the stage of the game, there are a few things that you want to focus on. For example, in the laning phase, what matters is the most, especially if your lane is pushed up, is the whereabouts of the enemy team. Is anyone missing from their lane? If they're missing for too long, you can assume that they're heading towards you for a gank. Are camps disappearing from the minimap? That might mean that they're clearing the jungle, and depending on the direction, they might be heading your way. Try to avoid taking any risky fights or giving your lane opponents that opening if you aren't entirely sure that an enemy isn't around and that they're waiting for a way in. Usually enemies just give this away, by the way. Like if they've been playing under the turret super passive and then all of a sudden start pushing you and the enemies are missing from the map, it's safe to assume that a gank is coming and you should probably just back off, but play off your own gut here. I'm just telling you what goes through my mind. Staying vigilant around the map will also help in case your teammates are coming to help you out, since they don't always ping it or tell you beforehand. As you leave the laning phase, you also want to keep an eye on the trooper waves as well as the whereabouts and statues of the jungle camps. Are the lanes pushed up? Are they frozen or being pushed in? If the lanes are pushed in towards you, towards your side, then you can't get into any prolonged fights without losing out on farm, losing map control, and taking objectives objective damage or even losing objectives over a long enough period of a time. I also want to mention something that a lot of people, myself included again, do wrong. Honestly, this probably will cost you a lot of unnecessary games, which is that in the mid to late game, especially the longer the games go on for, the more important it will be not that you don't make a bad decision, but that you don't make the wrong decision. When you're playing a game of Deadlock, you can make a good decision, which is the most optimal one, with your team, where you're taking the right objective, you're taking the right fight, you get it. But you could also make a bad decision where you take a fight with your team that you probably shouldn't, or you go for an objective that you might not have the time or the opening for. Like, let's say you're taking the mid boss when Lash is alive and waiting, or you're going for a walker when the enemy team is just around the corner. Whatever the call is a good or bad one, as long as you're playing with your team as 6, then it is a good decision. But if you for whatever reason get split away from your team as they're doing everything on their own, as in all of those 5 guys are doing one thing, you're doing another, and you are keeping to yourself because they're doing the bad call, then that bad call will be a guaranteed loss, but not because it's not the optimal decision to make, it's because they're not doing it as a full team. And it's obvious, right? If there are only 5, they're fighting as 6 people for an objective, they're probably gonna lose. Not to mention that you're gonna end up pissing off your teammates since you weren't there when they needed you. And that will end up being not the good and not the bad decision, it's gonna end up being the wrong decision. So make sure you stick with your team, and as long as you play together, then you'd be surprised just how many bad calls you can get away with. Obviously, you just want to make good calls, but life is not black and white. In the same vein, if you are with your team but spot one of your teammates being off, doing God knows what across the map, or running around on their own too deep into enemy territory, do not hesitate to tell them to get back to you. There's even a great feature in the game where if you ping a teammate, then they will receive a retreat ping, which tells them to fall back. Anyone who runs off on their own past the mid game, especially if they're inside of a lane, are guaranteed to get picked off, and it's going to cost their team a lot of objectives, or maybe even the entire game. So you do not want to be the one who gets caught, and it is paramount that you stop your teammates from being that guy as well. In addition to that, if you notice that one of your teammates are aimlessly running it down, make a call to go kill him, since that pick might just be the opening that you need to turn the game around or to close it out. I also want to add that you don't always need to force fights with the enemy teams to win a game. In Deadlock, like any MOBA, are all about the objectives, and very often you can end up trading objectives or end up taking objectives for completely free without even having a fight if the enemy team is wasting time running around or waiting or whatever. And depending on how far you are into the game, and even with the recent soul urn buffs, I consider running the soul urn to be about equal value to maybe a guardian, leaning towards the urn being more favorable, especially around the start of the game. But after that, if you were speaking about the value of each objective, I would lean towards a walker being more valuable, and then the mid boss, gate bosses, shrines, then the patron, and of course finishing the game in that order. So if the enemy runs a soul urn but leaves a walker completely open for you to take, then the trade is very much worth it. Generally speaking, the urn will be worth more at the start of the game, since 1,000 or so souls per person are worth a lot more when you're just starting out, and as the game progresses, the urn loses its relative value compared to objectives, since you aren't as desperate for souls as you once were. You instead want flex slots or map control or whatever. Now this is obviously very simplified for the sake of the video, there's going to be some exceptions, but if you guys are interested, then I could cover this concept in a more in-depth video in the future as well. Subscribe for that. Another important thing for the sake of your mental is accepting that there will be unwinnable games. I know this is a tip video, and what good does a mental adjustment do if I just want to win one game? Well, it actually does, because you might just be better off mentally, but let me just explain. Come to terms with the fact that there will be unwinnable games. Come to terms with the fact that there will be unlosable games. A common saying from team versus team competitive games, which will be even more relevant in a solo queue only ranked game, is that about a third of your games are going to be unwinnable. A third of the games will be unlosable, as in you're gonna get carried across the finish line. You're gonna win even if you're actively trying to throw, and then the final third is up to you. Now the ratios can be debated and it depends on your skill, but as somebody who basically only plays solo queue in every game, especially Deadlock, it is very true. Always try your hardest, but just know that a portion of your games will be lost from the get-go before you even get to your lane in the first place. And there's going to be games that you thought were winnable until somebody got caught at the 40th minute, which turned it into a loss. And it might just be completely out of your control. Somebody might get tilted and start throwing. You never know. And that's just how these games go sometimes. But if you can accept that fact from the start, if you can accept that a portion of your games are going to be lost, no matter what you do, then you will be able to prepare for that and be able to, give it your all in the other games where it actually matters. But keep in mind that the longer a game goes on for, the more volatile the outcome becomes and the more likely a comeback is to happen. Speaking of which, know that many lost games aren't actually lost just because you are behind. Many heroes, like Infernus or Haze, need a lot of souls to really get going, which means that the players on those heroes usually will just focus on farming until they have the items that they need. They might forego grouping for objectives or fights because they're like, oh yeah, no, I just want to get my souls. I don't condone going full AFK to farm for the entire game, and I don't think that is the play because you still need to contribute to a fight, but just be aware that they might not want to start a fight until they start getting online, and you could consider trying to farm instead of getting into a random, I guess, mid-fight or whatever. What this also means is that if you have enough late-game heroes, then a large souls deficit might turn into a one game farther down the line. Contrary to what I said before, many players think that getting farmed up is all you need to win a game, as if having a 50k souls lead over the enemy team magically gives you a win, and forget that they need to get objectives and even sometimes kills in the process to actually win the game. Having a bunch of souls won't change the fact that you still haven't taken a walker. Farming is the way to get there, but if you don't grab objectives to further your lead, then having a bunch of souls won't make a difference. And finally, as with most games of Deadlock, knowing item counters will make or break the outcome of your game, especially if there's one specific hero in the game that's giving you trouble. Maybe that's the one with the 50k souls lead while everyone else is in a deficit. And whether it is in the early game, the mid game, or the late game, there's going to be a one hero that you might want to counter. That being said, not only one member should be the one to buy a specific counter item, especially in the later parts of the game, and if possible, you should try coordinating with your teammates so you have one or two counter items each at most. Maybe you pick up a knockdown, another teammate picks up a heal bane or a curse. Just make sure you have a lot of different counters to help with a lot of separate heroes. If you don't know which items counters what hero, then you really should click the video on the screen, because in that video I've covered everything. Anyways, that's 10 quick tips to give you guys an edge in ranked Deadlock. Make sure to subscribe to stay tuned for more down the line, and sorry for the lower quality video, it's a bit rushed, I know. I just wanted to make sure to get this one out just in time for the release of ranked. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Peace out.